Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Eylon Levy, an Israeli government spokesman. Thank you very much for joining us. First, a brief update, and then we will take your questions. Since declaring war with the October 7th massacre, Hamas has fired over 9,500 rockets at Israel. Over 7,200 Israelis have been injured. The IDF has notified 352 families that their loved ones have fallen in battle, as well as 59 members of the police force. The revised hostage count in Gaza is now at least 239, including nationals of 27 different countries. Today's operational update. The IDF continues to target the masterminds of the October 7th massacre. Today, an airstrike killed Ibrahim Abu Maghzib, head of the anti-tank missile unit in the Hamas Central Camps Brigade. The 162nd Division has entered the Hamas military quarter of Gaza City to neutralize terror infrastructure, including the tunnel network. Over 50 terrorists were killed in intense fighting there. The IDF continues to expose evidence of Hamas war crimes as it dismantles the Hamas terror state in Gaza. In the Sheikh Radwan district of Gaza City, forces discovered a UAV factory inside a residential building, finding explosives right next door to a children's bedroom in the vicinity of a school. Two important humanitarian updates. First, the IDF is intensifying efforts to ensure that the Palestinian civilians remaining in northern Gaza move out of harm's way. Today, the army made a new push to help Palestinian civilians. Hamas is stopping from evacuating and is holding as human shields. Any Palestinians being held by Hamas in the line of fire are being urged to contact us on +972 50 341 0322 or by Telegram on Gaza_Saver. This is a war with Hamas, not the people of Gaza, and we want you out of the war zone. Second update. Today, Kogat announced that Israel has doubled the capacities for inspecting humanitarian aid to make sure it reaches the civilians who need it and make sure that Hamas cannot steal it. We call on international agencies to boost their own logistical capabilities to increase the provision of aid to Gazans who have heeded our warning to evacuate south for their safety. Now, as in every briefing, I want to draw attention to the hostages in Gaza. This is Ruth Haran, aged 88, a Holocaust survivor. She is not a hostage, but 7 members of her family are, including her daughter-in-law Shoshan, her granddaughter Adi, and Adi's husband Tal, together with their children Naveh, aged 8, and Yahel, also aged 3. Her daughter Sharon Avigdori, and Sharon's 12-year-old daughter Noam. Ruth's son, Avshalom, was murdered. Mrs. Haran survived the Nazis. On TV last night, she described running for her life from the Hamas death squads during the October 7th massacre. She remembered the bodies, children's bodies, babies' bodies on the grass in Kibbutz Be'eri. "Thank God I don't have long to live," she said. "I know how to contain the pain, but this time I can't hold it in." She wakes up at night, images of her abducted family flashing before her eyes. "This was a Holocaust," she said. "If they cut open a pregnant woman's belly with a knife, if they murder babies, is this not a Holocaust?" She survived the Nazis. She only just survived Hamas. Today, on the 85th anniversary of Kristallnacht, I want to be clear. We will never forgive Hamas for destroying the lives of our Holocaust survivors, murdering their children, abducting their grandchildren, making them flee their homes, keeping them awake with nightmares, keeping them awake with flashbacks to the Nazis. For that alone, we will destroy Hamas. Never forgive, never forget, never again. Finally, a word following the shocking revelations last night from the Honest Reporting NGO about Gaza-based photographers embedded in the rampage through the kibbutzim on October 7th. Much has been said about this, and I wish to add a few more notes about this issue. For 16 years, Hamas has ruled Gaza with an iron fist. It is an authoritarian regime that does not allow a free press. It controls the flow of information, and it decides what materials you will and will not receive. Journalists working in authoritarian regimes know that there are limitations on what they can say. The people providing stories from Gaza know that they are not free to provide the full story if they have not, in fact, been co-opted by Hamas. We urge foreign bureaus to be aware of the same limitations and risks and evaluate the information that they are receiving accordingly. Unfortunately, the local fixers and freelancers in Gaza may be either cowed by Hamas or complicit with Hamas. In either case, they are neither free nor independent. We urge all international media outlets to launch urgent and thorough investigations of the allegations from last night and assess the serious ethical questions that they raise. Just like the Al-Ahli hospital sham, we know that this scandal must prompt a serious re-evaluation of how information is obtained from the Hamas-run Gaza Strip, as you would in any other authoritarian regime. The IDF, it would appear, has become the most reliable investigative outfit in the Gaza Strip in recent days, going door to door, scoop to scoop, expose to expose, to reveal the Hamas rocket launchers in amusement parks, the booby-trapped cables in clinics, the rocket launchers in mosques. The fact that Hamas has a whole mini-Pentagon underneath Gaza's biggest hospital. It is regrettable that none of the world media stringers in Gaza thought to report this at any point over the 16 years of Hamas's reign of terror, 16 years, of course, in which they were not free to speak, even had they wanted to. And this raises serious ethical questions about the veracity and credibility of their reporting in this war. We'll now take any questions that you have. A question about the journalists who it is alleged were embedded with Hamas during the October 7th massacre. Do they receive their press credentials? They are not operating in the state of Israel. They are operating in the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip, and it is Hamas that is responsible for supervising, regulating, and of course restricting what they can or cannot say inside the Gaza Strip. Okay, a question. I see this is in relation to a remark from the White House about whether Israel will facilitate 4-hour humanitarian pauses to allow the provision of humanitarian aid. The fighting continues as we push ahead with our goal of destroying Hamas and dismantling its terror state. There will be no ceasefire without a return of our hostages. Israel is, however, facilitating safe corridors from the north of the Gaza Strip to the south, and indeed 50,000 Gazans took advantage of that humanitarian corridor yesterday to get out of harm's way, as Israel has been urging them to move for the past 27 days. We repeat our call, as I said, first issued a month ago, on the civilian population in the northern Gaza Strip to evacuate a short distance temporarily for their own safety to the south of the Gaza Strip. We do not want civilians to be in harm's way as the fighting intensifies in areas where Hamas has embedded itself most deeply underneath civilian areas. David Isaac from JNS, please. The plight of the 239 hostages who are being held incommunicado by masked gunmen in the Gaza Strip is the humanitarian crisis that is the top of our priorities and concerns in the Gaza Strip at the moment. We're doing everything we can in order to shine a spotlight on the fate of those hostages, as we've been doing in these briefings every day. And we urge the whole world to continue applying all possible pressure on Hamas and on its supporters to secure the immediate and unconditional release of our hostages. This is the number one issue that we are concerned about right now inside the Gaza Strip. We've seen many activists around the world drawing attention to the hostages by putting up posters. Shamefully, we've seen sociopathic individuals tearing down those posters. And of course, we expect all foreign governments, but especially our allies, to apply every possible pressure and continuing to shine a spotlight on that crisis of our innocent hostages who are being held incommunicado in the Gaza Strip. Mm-hmm. Jordan, a question from you, please. Sorry, Junko, sorry. Israel is focusing its efforts now in the northern Gaza Strip because that is where Hamas has embedded the bulk of its terror infrastructure. That's where most of the so-called Gaza Metro is, of the tunnels underneath schools and homes. That is where Hamas keeps its main military compounds underneath hospitals in flagrant violation of international law. But we've been very clear from the beginning of this campaign following the October 7th massacre, we will totally destroy Hamas's governing and terrorist infrastructure inside the Gaza Strip. We are going after every commander, every terrorist, every rocket launcher, every tunnel, wherever they may be in the Gaza Strip, so they can no longer terrorize our people like they have in the last 20 years and never pull off a massacre like they did on October 7th. So there is no immunity for any Hamas target inside the Gaza Strip, and anywhere that we are attacked from, if we see rockets coming from the south of the Wadi Gaza, of course Israel reserves the right to exercise its necessary and natural right of self-defense against those acts of aggression. We are concentrating our efforts in the north of the Gaza Strip and reserve the right to attack any Hamas terror infrastructure that is being used to continue attacks against our people, as we've seen in just the last month with 9,500 rockets fired at our home front. I would refer your questions on operational matters to the IDF. Tanya? I'll reaffirm what we said yesterday. It is still premature to discuss the day after Hamas scenarios. I wish the day after Hamas were next week. Unfortunately, it will take a long time to dismantle the Hamas terror state because it has spent 16 years systematically embedding itself underneath civilian areas inside the Gaza Strip. We're exploring several contingencies with international partners for what the day after will look like, but the common denominator among them is that the Gaza Strip must be demilitarized. It must never again turn into one large rocket launcher for rocket attacks against our cities and must never be used again as a terror base for the sorts of death squads we saw on October 7th. And we look forward to continuing to discuss with our allies ways that we can ensure that Israel receives the security that it has long deserved. Natanon? You have a question from Natanon. If you could just state your news outlet, please. There will be no ceasefire without a return of our hostages. That is our policy position. Washington Post. Hi, Brian. Israel is facilitating safe corridors from north to south so that Palestinian civilians are able to continue heeding our warning to get out and vacate to the south. The fighting is continuing, and there will be no ceasefire without a return of our hostages. We are, however, facilitating those safe corridors. Yesterday, I believe it was open from 10 o'clock in the morning till 2 in the afternoon, and the IDF is continuing to make those efforts to get civilians out of harm's way. We've all seen the images, of course, of IDF soldiers securing that humanitarian corridor. Yesterday, I saw Channel 4 reported interviewing an officer who explained that they were there standing between the civilians who were leaving and Hamas, because just a few days ago, Hamas attacked the soldiers who were securing that compound. We know that they are forcibly keeping people against their will in the northern Gaza Strip. That's why we published that number, so that people can contact the army and let them know if Hamas is holding them hostage. And we'll continue doing everything we can to get the other side's civilians out of harm's way so that we can fight Hamas man to man. I'm not going to commit to the exact length of the pauses. Yesterday, I know that the safe passage was a 4-hour window, and the IDF is going to continue facilitating that safe corridor. The overwhelming majority, I believe over 90% of residents of northern Gaza have already heeded our warning, and we hope the rest of them will do so as well. The corridor is a stretch of road that the Israeli army is securing for the benefit of Palestinian civilians wanting to evacuate the north to the safer areas in the south. Do we have another question? Any questions in the chat? Any hands up? No? Okay, in which case, thank you everyone for joining us. Again, if you have specific questions, please do send them to us by email in advance. It'll help us loop back with the relevant authorities and get you the information. Everyone, keep safe and have a good evening. Thank you very much.